The guitar shop was small, quiet, and filled with history. The smell of old wood and polished strings hung in the air. Vintage guitars lined the walls like trophies, each one carrying decades of music, sweat, and soul. Soft classic rock played in the background, barely louder than a whisper. Then the door opened. A man stepped inside quietly. Worn jacket, old shoes, no flashy watch, no assistance, no attention. Seeking presence, just a man who looked ordinary. The shop owner glanced at him just once. That was all it took. Not a buyer, he decided. The man moved slowly through the shop, stopping in front of the guitars. His eyes studied them with care. His fingers hovered near the strings, not touching, almost like he already knew exactly how each one would sound. The owner watched from behind the counter, arms crossed. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice sharp, impatient. "Yes," the man replied with a polite smile. "I'm looking for something special." The owner didn't hesitate. He pointed immediately to the most expensive guitar on the wall. "That one's not for people like you," he said bluntly. "It's very expensive." The words landed hard. The man followed the owner's finger with his eyes, then nodded calmly. He didn't argue. He didn't look offended. He simply stood there. Sensing no reaction, the owner pushed further, a smirk forming on his face. "Honestly," he added with a quiet laugh, "you probably can't afford it." The room shifted. A few customers glanced over. One frowned, another looked away, uncomfortable. The man said nothing. No defense, no explanation, no name dropped. He just took a small step back from the guitar, as if respecting a boundary that should never have existed. What the shop owner didn't realize, what no one else noticed yet, was that another man stood silently at the back of the store, dressed in black, sunglasses on, watching everything, and he recognized exactly who was being judged. The shop owner didn't stop. In fact, he leaned into it. "People come in here all the time just to waste time," he muttered loudly, making sure the whole shop could hear. "Real buyers don't dress like that." A few heads turned. The words weren't just careless, they were deliberate. The man stood still, his hands relaxed at his sides. He took a slow breath, choosing patience over pride. Then, quietly, he spoke again. "May I at least hold the guitar?" The owner let out a short laugh, the kind that carried more insult than humor. "No touching," he said. "If you damage it, you couldn't pay for it." The laughter faded. Silence swallowed the room. Even the background music seemed to feel smaller. The man lowered his eyes, not in shame, but in control. Because reacting would have been easy. Explaining would have ended it instantly. But he didn't, because this man was Ace Frehley, a legendary guitarist, a founding member of Kiss, a musician whose fingers had shaped rock history. Yet his name stayed unspoken. He wanted to see something. He wanted to see how far judgment could go when respect was removed. The owner mistook the silence for weakness. He shook his head, already dismissing the man as forgettable. A couple in the corner exchanged uneasy looks. One customer subtly lifted a phone, sensing something wrong. Ace stepped back slightly, giving the guitar space as if honoring it more than the man selling it. That's when he felt it, a presence not loud, not demanding, but unmistakable. Ace glanced toward the back of the shop. There stood a man dressed in black, sunglasses on, hands calmly in his pockets. He wasn't speaking. He wasn't reacting. He was observing, and he understood everything. Ozzy Osbourne, a legend in his own right. The Prince of Darkness, a man who had seen fame, ego, and disrespect in every form. Ozzy had watched the mocking. He had heard every word, and he remembered exactly what it felt like to be judged before being known. He said nothing, not yet, because sometimes the strongest response is to let the truth walk in on its own. Ozzy Osbourne saw everything, not just the words, but the intent behind them, the mocking tone, the careless disrespect, the quiet way Ace Frehley was made to feel like he didn't belong in a place built for people exactly like him. Ozzy stayed still. He didn't interrupt. He didn't announce himself. He watched. Ace gently placed the guitar back on its stand. Not hurried, not angry. almost ceremonial, like returning something sacred. He adjusted it carefully, making sure it rested perfectly, as if showing the instrument more respect than the man selling it ever had. Then Ace turned toward the door. That should have been the end. But the shop owner couldn't resist one final strike. With a smug smile, he called out loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Next time, bring money before chasing dreams." The words cut through the room. Ace stopped mid-step. For a moment, no one moved. Even Ozzy held his breath. Slowly, Ace turned around. There was no anger on his face, no bitterness, only calm, the kind that comes from someone who has already proven everything. He looked at the owner and spoke softly. Music is built on dreams. Just 6 words, but they carried decades of stages, tours, and history. Then Ace turned back toward the door and walked out. No argument, no explanation, no demand for respect. The bell above the door rang once as he left. The owner exhaled, satisfied. He leaned back behind the counter, convinced he'd put another dreamer in his place. A few customers looked uneasy. One woman shook her head slightly. Another man stared at the floor, but the owner didn't notice. He thought he'd won. Ozzy still hadn't moved. He stood quietly at the back of the shop, sunglasses hiding his eyes, but not his thoughts. He had seen this before. People judged first, listened last, and learned too late. Ozzy remembered walking into places just like this years ago, ignored, underestimated, dismissed. He remembered being told he didn't belong, and he remembered exactly how that felt. The lesson wasn't ready yet. Not until the timing was perfect. Ozzy took a slow step forward. The shop owner was about to learn something he would never forget. Because when respect is denied to the right person, the truth doesn't shout. It waits. Ozzy finally stepped forward. The movement was subtle, but the effect was instant. The shop owner noticed him and straightened up immediately. His expression changed as if a switch had been flipped. "Oh, sir, welcome," he said quickly, forcing a smile. "Please feel free to try anything you like." Ozzy didn't respond right away. He walked calmly toward the wall of guitars, his presence quiet, controlled, impossible to ignore. He reached for the same guitar Ace had been admiring only moments earlier, and lifted it gently from its stand. The owner hovered nearby, suddenly attentive. "Beautiful instrument," Ozzy said at last, then he paused. "Nice shop," he continued evenly, "but strange values." The owner laughed, a nervous, hollow sound. "Well, you know how business is," he replied, waving his hand. "We have to be careful." Ozzy turned slightly, still holding the guitar. "Careful about what?" he asked. The owner shrugged. "About who's serious?" Ozzy nodded slowly, as if considering the answer. Then he asked the question that changed everything. "Do you know who that man was?" he said, gesturing casually toward the door Ace had just walked through. The owner glanced over his shoulder, unimpressed. "Just another broke guy," he said. "Dreamers come in here all the time." Ozzy stopped moving. The room seemed to tighten. Slowly, deliberately, Ozzy reached up and removed his sunglasses. His eyes locked onto the owner's. "That," Ozzy said quietly, "was Ace Frehley." The color drained from the owner's face. His smile vanished. His mouth opened, then closed again. Ozzy didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The guitarist who helped shape rock music. He continued. "A founding member of Kiss. The kind of musician this shop exists because of." Each word landed heavier than the last. The owner's hands began to shake. I didn't know," he stammered. Ozzy placed the guitar back on its stand with care. "That's exactly the problem," he said. The customers stood frozen. No music played now, no whispers, no movement, only the sound of truth settling into the room. Because in that moment, the shop owner realized something devastating. He hadn't just insulted a customer. He had dismissed a legend, and the silence that followed was louder than any apology he could offer. The shop owner's confidence collapsed. His mouth opened, then closed again. Words came out broken. I didn't know," he stammered. Ozzy didn't react with anger. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't embarrass him. That made it worse. "That's the problem," Ozzy said calmly. You didn't care to know. The words weren't sharp, they were heavy. Ozzy turned back to the guitar in his hands and placed it gently on its stand, adjusting it with care. The same care Ace had shown, the same care the owner hadn't. You judged a musician by his clothes, Ozzy continued. By his silence. The owner swallowed hard. Ozzy took a small step closer, not threatening, just close enough that the truth couldn't be avoided. True legends don't need to prove anything, he said. They don't walk in announcing who they are. They let their work speak for them. The shop felt smaller now. Every customer had stopped pretending not to listen. A man near the counter crossed his arms. A woman shook her head slowly. Someone near the door quietly started recording. Ozzy gestured toward the guitars lining the walls. These instruments carry history, he said. Every scratch, every worn fret, that's experience. He looked back at the owner. You saw worn clothes and thought weakness. You saw silence and assumed nothing. Ozzy paused, but silence is often where greatness hides. The owner's eyes dropped to the floor. I made a mistake, he whispered. Ozzy nodded slightly. Yes, he said, you did. But there was no satisfaction in his voice. Only disappointment. You don't lose customers by being careful. Ozzy went on. You lose them by forgetting respect. He glanced toward the door again. The door Ace had walked through without demanding a single thing. That man didn't ask for special treatment, Ozzy said. He asked for the same respect you give anyone who looks important. The word looks hung in the air. Ozzy stepped back. Music doesn't care about appearances, he said. Neither does talent. The shop was completely silent now. No background music, no movement, no excuses left. Every word had landed, and the owner knew something painful and permanent. The lesson had arrived too late. The shop owner didn't hesitate. He rushed out the front door, nearly tripping over the threshold as the bell rang wildly above him. Outside, the afternoon light hit hard. Ace Frehley was already in the parking lot, walking slowly toward his car. Calm, unbothered, as if nothing had happened because to him the moment had already passed. Sir, please, the owner shouted, breathless. I'm sorry. Ace stopped. He turned around, his expression steady, not angry, not proud, just tired. The owner hurried closer, hands trembling. I didn't know who you were, he said quickly, desperation in his voice. If I had known, Ace raised a hand gently. That was enough. That's why it mattered. Ace said with a small, knowing smile. The words landed softly, but they carried weight. The owner froze. Ace continued, calm and clear. If you needed my name to treat me with respect, he said, then it wasn't respect at all. The owner's shoulders dropped. I made a mistake, he whispered. Ace nodded. Yes, he said, but not because you didn't recognize me. The owner looked confused. Ace glanced back at the shop. Because you didn't recognize a musician, he said, a person. Before the owner could respond, footsteps approached. Ozzy Osbourne stepped beside Ace, placing a hand on his shoulder. Ready? Ozzy asked quietly. Ace smiled. Yeah, Ozzy turned to the owner. We'll buy our guitars somewhere else, he said simply. No anger. No lecture, just finality. The two legends walked away together. The owner stood alone in the parking lot, watching them leave. No cameras, no applause, only regret, heavy and permanent, because some lessons don't come with second chances. And respect, once denied, can't always be earned back. Someone had been recording, not for drama, not for clout, just because something about the moment felt wrong. Within hours, the video was online. Then it spread. Fast, across platforms, across countries, across millions of screens. People didn't watch it for fame. They watched it for the lesson. A quiet man being dismissed, a legend choosing silence over ego. Another legend stepping in, not to embarrass but to teach. The comments poured in. Why do people judge so quickly? This hurt to watch. That owner will never forget this. The message was clear. Back and index pointing right, respect should come before recognition. Ace Frehley never demanded special treatment. He never said his name. He never tried to prove who he was. And Ozzy Osbourne never raised his voice, never insulted, never threatened. Yet together, they delivered a message louder than shouting ever could. Never judge a person by their appearance, because the person you dismiss, the one you underestimate, the one you ignore, might be the reason your world exists in the first place. That shop didn't lose business that day. It lost something far more valuable, integrity, and millions of people learned a lesson they would never forget. Because greatness doesn't always walk in wearing a crown. Sometimes it wears old shoes and waits to see who still believes in respect. If you believe respect should be given before status, comment respect, subscribe to Darkness Stories for powerful stories that remind us what truly matters.